I'm Amber Matthews, 28 years old, and I've spent my entire life being compared to my perfect older sister Brittany. For as long as I can remember, my parents have criticized me for being half the woman she is, in accomplishments, in appearance, in life choices. What they didn't know was that I had been building something extraordinary in silence. The look on their faces when I revealed my $84,000 secret at that family dinner was worth every moment of being underestimated. Before I tell you how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the family disappointment, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever felt overshadowed by a sibling. Growing up in suburban Boston in our middle-class neighborhood, the differences between my sister and me were always highlighted with painful clarity. Our modest two-story colonial house on Maple Street had 4 bedrooms, one for my parents, one for Brittany, one for me, and one that slowly transformed into a trophy room that was 90% filled with Brittany's accomplishments. Brittany was 3 years older, and from the moment I could form memories, I understood the hierarchy in our family. She was the golden child, tall, naturally athletic with honey blonde hair and our mother's bright blue eyes. I wasn't unattractive, just different, shorter, with dark brown hair and hazel eyes that didn't quite match either parent. Our father, Richard Matthews, worked as a bank manager and carried himself with the precise confidence of someone who valued order and success above all else. Our mother, Karen, taught 2nd grade at the local elementary school and was well loved by her students and their parents. They were respected in our community and built their identities around being good, accomplished parents. The problem was, in their eyes, they only had one accomplished child. Brittany excelled at everything she touched. At 8, she was selected for the competitive gymnastics team. By 10, she was winning regional piano competitions. By 12, she was class president and the highest-ranked student in her grade. She was sociable and confident, collecting friends as easily as she collected accolades. I was quieter, more introspective. I preferred books to sports fields and found comfort in technology rather than social gatherings. While Brittany performed Chopin at recitals to standing ovations, I would be at home teaching myself HTML and creating small websites. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my childhood, sometimes stated directly, more often implied through sighs and disappointed glances. I still remember my 5th grade piano recital. After practicing for weeks, I performed a piece I was proud of, no mistakes, even with my nervous hands. When I finished, my teacher gave me a warm smile and genuine applause followed from the audience. But when we got in the car, my father's first words were, "Well, that was nice, but nothing like when Brittany played at your age. She had real passion." My mother added, "Maybe we should focus on finding something that's actually your strength, honey." These moments accumulated like invisible bruises. School field days, family reunions, even casual Sunday dinners, all became opportunities to measure me against my sister and find me wanting. The pattern continued through elementary school. At science fairs, my solar system model made from recycled materials earned a polite nod from my parents, while they'd framed the newspaper clipping of Brittany's county-winning project from years before. When I brought home all A's except for 1 B+ in physical education, my father said, "Almost as good as Brittany, but not quite there." When I was 12, I discovered digital art through a free online program. I spent hours teaching myself to create designs, eventually making custom avatars and banners that I offered on a small forum for online gamers. Within 2 months, I'd earned $200, my first taste of entrepreneurship. Excited, I showed my parents the PayPal statement. "That's nice, dear," my mother said, barely looking up from preparing dinner. "But be careful about those internet people. They could be anyone." My father was more direct. "Don't waste too much time on computer games. Your sister was preparing for high school debate team at your age." That night, Brittany came into my room and actually showed interest in what I'd created. "These are pretty cool, Amber," she said, looking at my digital designs. For a moment, I felt a connection with my sister, but it was quickly severed when she added, "Maybe you could make me some graphics for my student council campaign?" "For free, of course, we're sisters." Even her acknowledgement came with the expectation that my talents should serve her goals. It was around this time that I developed a coping mechanism. I stopped sharing my interests and achievements with my family. If they couldn't see my value, I wouldn't give them the opportunity to diminish it. I retreated further into my online world, where my skills were recognized and appreciated. I started reading business blogs, teaching myself about digital marketing, and planning for a future where I wouldn't need anyone's validation. By the time I was 14, I had a clear understanding of my place in the family. I was the other daughter. The backup. The one who might be good, but never good enough. Brittany was the shining star, and I was just orbiting in her shadow. But beneath the quiet exterior I presented to my family, a determination was growing, a fire fueled by each dismissive comment and each overlooked achievement. If they couldn't see my worth on their terms, I would create success on my own, in a world they didn't understand or value. Not out of spite, but out of a deep need to prove to myself that I was whole, complete, and valuable, even if my family couldn't see it. High school only widened the gap between Brittany and me. She attended Cambridge Preparatory Academy, the same school I would later attend, but our experiences couldn't have been more different. Brittany was the quintessential high school success story. Freshman year, she made varsity volleyball. Sophomore year, she was dating the senior class president. Junior year, she scored nearly perfect on her SATs. And senior year, she was both homecoming queen and valedictorian, with an early acceptance letter to Harvard that my parents framed and hung in the living room before she even graduated. When it was announced that Brittany had been named valedictorian, my parents threw a surprise party. Relatives drove from 3 states away. My father rented a chocolate fountain. My mother cried during her toast, saying, "We always knew you were destined for greatness from the moment you were born." I stood in the corner, holding a plate of food I couldn't eat, 16 years old and already understanding that no achievement of mine would ever warrant such celebration. I wasn't failing, far from it. I maintained a 3.8 GPA, participated in the computer science club, and had a small circle of close friends who shared my interests. But in the Matthews household, being good wasn't enough when Brittany was great. While Brittany dominated the analog world of traditional high school success, I was quietly building my skills in the digital realm. At 16, I launched my first substantial online business, creating and selling digital planners and templates. I'd taught myself graphic design, basic marketing principles, and how to set up an online storefront. The first month, I made $300. The second month, $700. By the end of the school year, I was consistently earning over $1,000 monthly, more than most of my classmates made at their part-time retail jobs. But I'd learned my lesson about sharing successes. When I bought myself a new laptop with my earnings, I told my parents it was on sale. When I upgraded my phone, I said it was part of a promotion. The less they knew about my growing business, the less opportunity they had to compare it unfavorably to Brittany's achievements. The college application season of my senior year became a particular form of torture. 3 years earlier, Brittany's Harvard acceptance had been treated like a royal coronation. Now, as I researched programs with strong computer science and business departments, my parents seemed only mildly interested. Boston University has a good computer program, my father said, reviewing my college list with palpable lack of enthusiasm. Not Harvard good, but solid. Maybe aim for a few safety schools too. When I mentioned wanting to double major in computer science and business, my mother suggested, "Why not something easier, honey? College is hard enough without picking the most difficult majors." The subtext was clear, they didn't think I could handle it. I wasn't Brittany. When my acceptance letter from Boston University arrived, we went out for dinner, not the party Brittany had received, but at least a recognition. Until my father ruined it with a single sentence, "If only you had half your sister's drive, you might have been wearing crimson instead of red." I smiled and cut my chicken into tiny pieces, saying nothing. Inside, something hardened. The business I'd been building had just hit $2,000 in monthly revenue. I'd already been accepted to the program I wanted. I didn't need their approval anymore, I just needed their signatures on financial aid forms. During those high school years, I did have one person who saw me clearly, Jason Chen, my first serious boyfriend. We met junior year in AP Computer Science, one of only 2 girls in the class. While other guys were intimidated or condescending, Jason was impressed by my coding skills and business mind. "You think differently than anyone I know," he told me once as we sat debugging a project in the school library. "Everyone else follows the rules. You find ways to rewrite them." For the first time, someone was seeing strength in the very qualities my family dismissed. Jason encouraged me to pursue my business ideas, helped me test my website designs, and never once compared me to Brittany. Our relationship lasted through most of senior year, until Jason got accepted to MIT while I chose Boston University. We tried making it work, but the distance, emotional more than physical, eventually pulled us apart. Jason wanted me to focus on college rather than my side hustle, not understanding that my business wasn't just about money, it was about creating something that was entirely mine, something no one could measure against anyone else's accomplishments. "The night we broke up," he said, "sometimes I feel like you're running from something instead of towards something." He wasn't entirely wrong. I was running from being Brittany's little sister. I was running from every not quite and almost as good I'd heard throughout my childhood. But I was also running toward financial independence, toward proving my own worth, if only to myself. As high school ended and college loomed, I made a private promise: I would build something remarkable, something undeniably successful, and I would do it completely on my own terms. No comparisons, no expectations but my own. What I didn't know then was that the very invisibility I'd cultivated within my family would become my greatest asset. They had no expectations for my success, which meant I had complete freedom to define it for myself. In the fall of 2014, Brittany was beginning her senior year at Harvard while I was moving into a standard double dorm room at Boston University. The contrast between our college experiences was as stark as everything else in our lives had been. Brittany lived in a historic house with fellow honors students, attended exclusive networking events, and secured prestigious internships facilitated by Harvard's powerful alumni network. She double majored in economics and political science, with everyone expecting her to either attend an elite law school or enter the financial sector after graduation. Meanwhile, I was having a completely different but equally valuable experience. Boston University's computer science program was rigorous and practical. For the first time, my technical skills and problem-solving abilities were being properly challenged and developed. I excelled in my programming classes and found genuine joy in creating functional, elegant solutions to complex problems. It was during my introduction to marketing course sophomore year that I met Professor Williams, a former tech entrepreneur who had sold his company and turned to teaching. After I submitted a particularly innovative digital marketing project, he asked me to stay after class. "You have a mind for this," he said, leaning against his desk. "The technical skills combined with marketing instincts, that's a rare combination. What are you doing with it outside of class?" I hesitantly told him about my small digital products business and my growing interest in web design and development. "You should be charging more," he said immediately. "And thinking bigger. Have you considered offering services to actual businesses rather than just selling templates to individuals?" That 15-minute conversation changed the trajectory of my college experience. Professor Williams became my mentor, helping me transform my small operation into an actual web design and digital marketing business. He taught me about client acquisition, professional pricing structures, and how to position myself in the market. By the middle of sophomore year, I had converted my dorm room desk into a makeshift office. My roommate Lucy thought I was slightly crazy, working on client websites until 2 in the morning, but she respected the dedication. "Just make sure you're having some fun too," she would say, on her way out to parties I rarely attended. My first major client came through Professor Williams. His friend owned a boutique fitness studio in Back Bay and needed a website overhaul and social media strategy. The project paid $3,000, more than I'd ever earned at once. The night I finished that project and received payment, I wanted to call my parents and share my excitement. Brittany had just secured a summer internship at a prestigious consulting firm, and they had taken her out to celebrate at an expensive restaurant in Cambridge. When I called, they were just getting seated. "Can I call you back, honey?" my mother said, the sounds of clinking glasses and ambient conversation in the background. "We're just celebrating Brittany's wonderful news." "No problem," I said, my own news dying on my lips. "Have fun." I went out alone that night, treating myself to a nice dinner and a glass of wine with a fake ID. I sat at that restaurant table and made a business plan on napkins, calculating how many clients I would need to achieve financial independence by graduation. I decided that night that my success would be private, at least until it was too big to be dismissed or overshadowed. Sophomore year turned into junior year, and my business grew steadily. I hired 2 virtual assistants to help with basic design tasks. I created systems to manage multiple clients simultaneously. I built a professional website for my company, AM Digital Solutions, the initials of my name, but also morning, a fresh start, a new day. My relationship with Jason had ended in the first semester when he couldn't understand why I was wasting time building a business instead of focusing exclusively on my studies and the traditional internship path. "You're spreading yourself too thin," he argued during our last big fight. "College is for learning, not for running some side hustle." What Jason failed to understand was that I was learning, not just theory from textbooks, but practical, real-world business skills that no course could fully teach. Each client project was an education in client management, problem-solving, and delivering results under pressure. By the middle of junior year, I was earning more monthly than most recent graduates' starting salaries, all while maintaining a 3.7 GPA. My professors in the business school were impressed by my practical experience, often using my case studies in class discussions, with the client names changed for privacy. That Christmas, I returned home with news that I'd had my first $10,000 month in November. I'd rehearsed how I would casually mention it during dinner, not boasting but just sharing a milestone in my life. Then Brittany announced her engagement to Matthew, a medical student she'd met during her senior year at Harvard. He came from a wealthy Connecticut family and had already been accepted into a prestigious surgical residency program. My news vanished in the flurry of engagement excitement. My mother immediately started calling relatives. My father opened an expensive bottle of champagne he'd been saving for a special occasion. I sat quietly, offering the expected congratulations while my own achievement remained unspoken. Later that night, Brittany found me in my childhood bedroom, scrolling through client emails. "Always working," she said, sitting on the edge of my bed. "You know, you should really try to find balance. Matthew's friend from medical school is single, very smart, nice family. I could introduce you." "I'm not really looking to date right now," I replied, not mentioning that I couldn't imagine dating another person who didn't understand my ambitions. "Well, you know, life isn't all about work," Brittany said with the confidence of someone who had never had to prove her worth. "You should think about your personal life too. You're already 21. I smiled tightly and changed the subject, asking about her engagement ring. As she happily launched into the story of Matthew's elaborate proposal, I realized that even Brittany saw me as somewhat deficient, a workaholic with no social life, someone to be fixed rather than understood. What she and my parents didn't grasp was that I wasn't working constantly because I was compensating or hiding from social interaction. I was building something I was passionate about, something that gave me purpose and pride. The fact that none of them could see that only strengthened my resolve to continue on my path. Senior year arrived, and with it came the divergence in our post-education trajectories. Brittany, now with a master's degree from Harvard in public policy, was planning her summer wedding to Matthew while he continued his surgical residency. I was preparing to transition my business from a dorm room operation to a legitimate, full-time company after graduation. My graduation ceremony was sparsely attended. My parents and Brittany came, but they had to leave early to get to a dinner with Matthew's parents to discuss wedding venues. As we took obligatory photos in my cap and gown, my father said, "Well, at least you finished. That's the important thing." The backhanded compliment stung, but I just smiled for the camera. They had no idea that I had already signed 3 major clients for post-graduation projects, or that I had enough savings to put a down payment on a small condo if I wanted to. As we parted, my mother hugged me and said, "Now the real work begins, finding a good job in this economy won't be easy, even with a decent degree. I didn't correct her assumption that I would be job hunting like every other graduate. Let them think what they wanted. My silence had become both a shield and a strategy. Someday, they would see the reality I had been building all along, but only when the evidence was too substantial to minimize or dismiss. After graduation, I rented a modest one-bedroom apartment in Brighton, a neighborhood popular with young professionals and graduate students. It was nothing fancy, just a basic space with white walls, laminate countertops, and enough room for a proper desk setup. To my family, it looked exactly like what they expected, a starter apartment for a new college graduate with uncertain prospects. What they didn't know was that I could have afforded much more. By this point, AM Digital Solutions was consistently bringing in over $15,000 monthly, but I deliberately kept my visible lifestyle modest. Every extra dollar went into growing the business and into carefully hidden savings and investment accounts. I made a strategic decision to focus my business on a specific niche that I saw was underserved, helping female entrepreneurs and small business owners improve their digital presence and online marketing. I'd noticed that many women with brilliant business ideas lacked the technical knowledge to effectively market themselves online, and larger agencies often overcharged them for basic services. My approach was different. I created packages specifically designed for small businesses with limited budgets but big ambitions. I spoke their language, understood their constraints, and delivered results that actually impacted their bottom line. Word of mouth spread quickly. Female entrepreneurs referred me to their networks, and soon I had to start turning away clients or putting them on a waiting list. 6 months after graduation, I hired my first full-time employee, a recent graphic design graduate named Taylor who complemented my technical skills perfectly. With Taylor handling design elements, I could focus more on strategy and client acquisition. We worked remotely most days, meeting weekly at coffee shops to collaborate in person. My office remained my apartment, which kept overhead costs low and maximized profits. When my parents called to check in, which was infrequent compared to their daily calls with Brittany, I kept conversations vague about work. "How's the job hunt going?" my mother would ask. "I'm doing some freelance web design while I figure things out," I'd reply, technically not lying but dramatically understating the reality. "Don't get too comfortable with that," my father would warn. "You need something stable with benefits. Security should be your priority now." Meanwhile, I was securing client contracts worth thousands of dollars and building relationships with businesses across New England. Every time I visited my parents, I dressed down, drove my modest used Honda Civic, and never wore the few designer items I'd allowed myself to purchase as rewards for hitting business milestones. My one confidant during this time was Rachel Harris, a fellow BU graduate I'd befriended during senior year when we collaborated on a group project. Unlike Jason, Rachel immediately understood and respected what I was building. She worked at a marketing agency herself and often referred clients to me who were too small for her firm but perfect for mine. Rachel was the only person who knew the true state of my finances and business growth. When I hit my first $20,000 month, she was the one who took me out to celebrate. "You realize you're making more than most of our classmates who went to work for big corporations, right?" she said over cocktails at an upscale bar in Boston. "I know," I said, still somewhat amazed myself. "But my parents still think I'm barely getting by doing computer stuff." Rachel shook her head. "I don't get it. Why not just tell them? Wouldn't it feel good to prove them wrong after all these years of comparison?" I considered her question seriously. "It's not about proving them wrong anymore," I said finally. "It's about proving myself right. I need to know that I'm building this because it's what I want, not as a reaction to them. And honestly, I'm not ready for their reaction yet. They'll either try to take credit somehow or find a way to diminish it." "Like what?" Rachel asked. "Oh, I can hear it now," I said, mimicking my father's voice. "That's nice, but it's not a real career with advancement opportunities like Brittany's husband has. Or my mother, but when will you have time to meet someone and start a family?" Rachel laughed, but she understood. "So what's the end game here?" Secret success forever? No, I said, swirling my drink. Just until it's so big they can't possibly minimize it. Until the evidence is undeniable. While my business grew, Brittany's picture-perfect life progressed exactly as everyone expected. She and Matthew bought a large colonial house in an upscale suburb with his surgeon's salary and family money. They had their first baby, a girl named Sophie, who instantly became the center of my parents' world. My parents began babysitting for Brittany every Tuesday and Thursday while she worked part-time at a non-profit that aligned with her master's degree. They rearranged their entire schedule to accommodate her needs, posting endless photos of baby Sophie on social media and calling me to share every minor milestone. She smiled at me today, my mother would gush over the phone. She's so advanced for her age. Meanwhile, they had visited my apartment exactly once, for a rushed coffee when they were in Boston for one of Matthew's work events. My father had looked around with a critical eye and said, "Well, it's a start. Hopefully, you'll move somewhere better once you find a real job." I nodded and offered more coffee, biting back the information that I had just signed a contract with my largest client yet, a women's professional clothing brand that was paying me $35,000 to overhaul their entire digital presence. When family gatherings occurred, the dynamic remained predictable. Brittany would share news about Sophie's development or Matthew's surgical career, receiving enthusiastic responses and follow-up questions. When it was my turn, my vague updates about work going well were met with polite nods before the conversation quickly returned to more interesting topics. "When will you get a real job?" my father asked during Thanksgiving dinner, after I mentioned expanding my freelance work. "This is my real job, Dad," I replied mildly. "It pays the bills." "But there's no security in freelancing," he persisted. "No retirement plan, no health insurance. You need to think about the future." I had a six-figure sum in investments and a health insurance plan better than the one he'd had working at the bank for 30 years, but I just nodded and passed the cranberry sauce. My mother was more focused on my personal life, or perceived lack thereof. "You know," she said during the same dinner, "working all the time won't make you happy in the long run. Have you thought about taking some classes at the community college? The dental hygiene program is just 2 years, and it's steady work. You might meet some nice people too." "I'm happy with my work, Mom," I said, forcing a smile. "And I have friends." Brittany jumped in with her own helpful suggestion. "Matthew's brother is moving to Boston next month for his residency. He's a bit quiet, but really smart. He doesn't mind that you're not the conventional type." "The conventional type?" I repeated. "You know what I mean," Brittany said, bouncing Sophie on her knee. "You're more intellectual. Career-focused." Even in her attempt to be kind, the implication was clear. I was the lesser option, the sister who needed help finding a partner because I couldn't possibly attract one on my own merits. As my business grew, hiding my success became increasingly complicated. I had to be careful about social media, knowing my family occasionally checked my profiles. I had a public LinkedIn page that dramatically understated my role, describing me as a digital marketing consultant rather than the CEO of a growing agency. I purchased my first new car, a modest but new Honda rather than the luxury vehicle I could afford, and explained it away as a great lease deal. The most challenging moment came when I decided to buy my condo in downtown Boston. It was a beautiful one-bedroom in a doorman building with a gym and a roof deck, costing well over $500,000. I could afford the down payment without touching my business capital, but I knew a property purchase would be impossible to hide completely. So I created a cover story about having roommates in a shared apartment, explaining the doorman as a security guard who watched over the apartment complex. When my parents or Brittany visited, I would meet them at restaurants or coffee shops, never inviting them to my home. Was it exhausting maintaining this facade? Sometimes. But each month as I reviewed my business growth and personal financial statements, I felt a deep satisfaction that wasn't about them anymore. I was proud of what I had built, regardless of whether my family ever appreciated it. The secret had become almost enjoyable, a private success that was all mine, untainted by comparisons or backhanded compliments. By the time I turned 27, AM Digital Solutions had grown to a team of 7 remote employees. We had clients across the country, a portfolio of success stories, and a waiting list of businesses wanting to work with us. My personal income regularly exceeded $50,000 monthly, and I had investments and savings that many people twice my age would envy. Rachel, still my closest confidant, finally confronted me during our monthly dinner. "Amber, this is getting ridiculous. You're running a successful company. You own a beautiful condo. You've helped dozens of women grow their businesses. Why are you still hiding this from your family?" I pushed my food around my plate, considering her question. "I don't know anymore," I admitted. "It started as self-preservation. Now it's just habit." "They're missing out on knowing the real you," Rachel said. "And maybe you're missing out on having a more authentic relationship with them." "Do I even want that?" I asked, surprising myself with the question. "After all these years of being compared and found wanting?" "That's for you to decide," Rachel said. "But hiding your success isn't going to heal anything. It's just maintaining the status quo." She was right, and something inside me knew it was time for a change. I just needed the right moment, and maybe a final push. That final push came sooner than I expected. In the spring before I turned 28, several events converged to create the perfect storm that would finally break my silence. First, AM Digital Solutions hit a significant milestone, $50,000 in monthly recurring revenue, not including one-time projects. We had expanded our services to include comprehensive digital strategy for women-owned businesses, and our client retention rate was near perfect. I had been featured in a business magazine as one of Boston's rising digital entrepreneurs, a copy of which I kept hidden in my desk drawer rather than framed on my wall. Around the same time, Brittany announced her second pregnancy. My parents were ecstatic, of course, and immediately jumped into planning mode. Within days of the announcement, my mother called me with a request. "Amber, honey, we need your help. Brittany is so busy with Sophie and her work, and the morning sickness is just terrible this time around. Could you plan her baby shower? You're good with that computer stuff, so you could make the invitations." Good with that computer stuff was how my mother typically referred to my entire career. The dismissiveness stung as always, but it was the assumption that I would drop everything to plan Brittany's celebration that really bothered me. "I'm actually pretty busy with work right now, Mom," I said carefully. "Busy with what? Those websites?" "Surely you can take a weekend off for your only sister," she replied, clearly not grasping that my business required more than occasional weekend tinkering. "It's not that simple, Mom. I have client deadlines and—" "Amber," she interrupted, "family comes first. Brittany would do it for you." I bit back the obvious retort that Brittany had never been asked to do anything comparable for me. Instead, I reluctantly agreed to help with the shower, knowing it would fall entirely on my shoulders. A few weeks later came the annual family dinner to celebrate my birthday. The timing was unfortunate, just 2 days after Brittany's first ultrasound for baby number 2. When I arrived at my parents' house, I found the dining table decorated not with birthday decorations but with blue balloons and a cake that read "It's a boy." "Hope you don't mind sharing your birthday dinner with Brittany's news," my father said, not really asking. "It's just such an exciting time." I forced a smile and sent my own gift to myself, a small cake I'd picked up from an expensive bakery, in the refrigerator, where it remained forgotten the entire evening. During dinner, while everyone was discussing baby names, my father turned to me with what he probably thought was well-meaning advice. "You know, Amber, at 28, you might want to think about freezing your eggs. Since you're so focused on your little website thing instead of finding a husband." I nearly choked on my water. "My what?" "Your egg freezing," he repeated, as if I was confused about the biological concept rather than his audacity. "Matthew has a colleague who specializes in it. Women your age who are career-focused often regret not thinking ahead." Before I could formulate a response, Brittany jumped in with her own helpful suggestion. "I told you, I can introduce you to Matthew's brother. He's still single, and he said he doesn't mind that you're not the conventional type, It was the second time she'd used that phrase, and this time it hit a nerve. What exactly do you mean by not the conventional type, Brittany? I asked, my voice carefully controlled. Oh, she said, waving her hand vaguely. You're more cerebral. Computer-focused. Not every guy appreciates that, but David is really intellectual too. So you're offering me your husband's brother as some kind of charity case? Because otherwise, who would want the less attractive, less successful Matthew's sister? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Brittany looked genuinely shocked. That's not what I meant at all, she said. I just thought you might be lonely. Why would you assume I'm lonely? I asked. Well, you're always working, living in that shared apartment, no serious relationship since college. She trailed off, realizing she was only digging herself deeper. My mother attempted to smooth things over. Brittany just wants you to be happy, honey. Like she is. Because clearly her version of happiness is the only valid one, I said, setting down my napkin. Now, Amber, my father interjected, don't be dramatic. At this rate, you'll be half the woman your sister is forever. She's just trying to help you catch up a little. Half the woman. The phrase I'd heard explicitly and implicitly my entire life. Something inside me cracked, not in the way of breaking down, but in the way of breaking free. I excused myself from the table and stepped outside, calling Rachel. They did it again, I said without preamble when she answered. The comparison thing? Yes, but worse this time. My father actually said I'll be half the woman Brittany is forever. Rachel's outrage on my behalf was immediate and validating. That's it. The time for hiding is over. You need to show them exactly who you are and what you've built. You're right, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. But I need to do it right. Not just blurt it out in anger. So what's the plan? Rachel asked. I'm going to prepare properly. Gather all the evidence. And then find the perfect moment to reveal everything. That moment presented itself just a week later when my parents called to cancel our plans for a Sunday brunch, plans we'd had on the calendar for over a month. Something came up with Brittany, my mother explained. She needs help picking out furniture for the nursery, and the store is having a sale that ends Sunday. Of course it was Brittany. It was always Brittany. I understand, I said, and for once, I truly did. This was the pattern that would continue indefinitely unless I changed it. After hanging up, I made a decision. My father's promotion to regional bank manager was being celebrated the following weekend with a family dinner at their home. That would be my moment. I began gathering everything I would need: financial statements, business metrics, press clippings, and client testimonials. I even prepared a small presentation on my iPad, complete with growth charts and projections. Rachel helped me rehearse what I would say, how I would respond to likely reactions, and most importantly, how to maintain my composure throughout. Remember, she said during our final strategy session, this isn't about making them feel bad. It's about finally being seen for who you really are. As the day approached, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Whatever happened at that dinner, I would no longer be hiding. For better or worse, my family would finally see the woman I had become, not half of anyone, but completely, successfully myself. The evening of my father's promotion celebration arrived with clear skies and mild spring temperatures. I chose my outfit carefully, a sleek black dress with a subtle designer label, pearl earrings, and the sophisticated watch I'd bought myself after signing my biggest client to date. Professional but not flashy, successful without being showy. I deliberately arrived 15 minutes late, knowing that in the Matthews family hierarchy, punctuality was expected of everyone except Brittany, who was typically forgiven for running on mommy time. Walking into my parents' house with calculated confidence, I greeted everyone with warm smiles and congratulated my father on his promotion. Regional manager after 30 years at First Boston, he said, beaming as he accepted congratulations. Patience and hard work always pay off. The dining room was set with the good china, crystal glasses, and my mother's embroidered tablecloth saved for special occasions. Brittany, Matthew, and 3-year-old Sophie were already seated, with Brittany's baby bump now visible beneath her flowing maternity dress. My mother bustled between kitchen and dining room, bringing out steaming dishes of her signature roast beef and garlic mashed potatoes. As we settled into dinner, the family dynamics unfolded exactly as they had hundreds of times before. My father dominated the conversation with stories about his career journey and the challenges he'd overcome. My mother beamed at him adoringly while simultaneously ensuring everyone's water glasses remained filled. Brittany shared updates about Sophie's preschool achievements and her pregnancy, receiving enthusiastic responses from our parents. Sophie's teacher says she might be gifted, Brittany announced, to my mother's delighted gasp. She's reading at a 5-year-old level already. The Matthew's intelligence, my father said proudly, raising his glass. Just like her mother. Harvard material for sure. When conversation turned to me, it followed the usual script. And how's the computer work going, Amber? My mother asked, in the same tone she might use to inquire about a temporary hobby. It's going well, I said, offering my standard vague response. Still doing the freelance thing? My father asked, skepticism evident in his voice. You know, with my new position, I could put in a word for you at the bank. The marketing department always needs people, and it would give you some stability. Thank you, but I'm actually quite satisfied with my current situation, I replied, fighting to keep my expression neutral. Brittany jumped in with her own helpful suggestion. David is still interested in meeting you, by the way. He just bought a condo in South End. That's nice, I said non-committally, taking a sip of water. You should really consider it, Amber, my mother added. He's a doctor, like Matthew. Very stable career. I nodded politely and redirected the conversation back to my father's promotion, knowing my moment would come soon enough. After the main course, as my mother began clearing plates for dessert, my father stood to make a toast. He raised his glass, looking around the table with satisfaction. I want to thank everyone for celebrating this milestone with me. 30 years of dedication has finally paid off. But my career success would mean nothing without my family. He turned toward my mother. Karen, your support has made everything possible. Then to Brittany. And I'm so proud of the family you're building, continuing the Matthews legacy of success. He paused, then glanced at me with a quick, almost obligatory nod. And Amber, well, you're young still. Finding your way. The dismissal was so casual, so automatic, that I almost laughed. It was the perfect opening. Actually, I said, setting down my water glass carefully, I'd like to make an announcement of my own, if that's okay. My father looked surprised but nodded, probably expecting some minor news about a new freelance gig or perhaps even a date with Brittany's doctor prospect. Since we're celebrating success tonight, I continued, pulling my phone from my purse, I thought it might be a good time to share some of my own achievements that you might not be aware of. The confused looks around the table told me they had no idea what was coming. I opened my gallery app and passed my phone to my father. This is the cover of Boston Business Quarterly from last month, I explained as he squinted at the screen. That's me, being featured as one of the top digital entrepreneurs under 30 in New England. My father stared at the image, clearly processing what he was seeing. My mother leaned over his shoulder, her expression shifting from confusion to surprise. I don't understand, my father said. What exactly is this for? For my company, AM Digital Solutions. I founded it during my junior year of college, and I've been running it full-time since graduation. Your freelance work? My mother asked, still not comprehending. It's not freelance work, Mom. It's a digital marketing and web development agency. I'm the CEO. We have 7 full-time employees and a client roster that includes national brands. Brittany was now looking at the magazine cover, her perfectly shaped eyebrows raised in surprise. You own a company? Since when? Since 6 years ago, I replied evenly. I've just never talked about it. I reached into my purse again and pulled out a folded bank statement, sliding it across the table to my father. Last month's revenue was $84,000. That's just for April, not counting the first quarter. My father picked up the statement, his banker's eyes automatically scanning the numbers. I could see the exact moment the figure registered, his expression shifting from skepticism to shock. "This can't be right," he said, looking up at me. "It is," I replied. "And that's just revenue. I can show you profit margins too, if you'd like." My mother was now standing behind my father, one hand on his shoulder, staring at the statement as if it were written in hieroglyphics. "But, how? When? I've been building this business for years. Remember that computer stuff I was always doing? That wasn't a hobby. It was entrepreneurship." I turned to my phone again, pulling up photos of my downtown condo. "I also don't have roommates. I own my condo. I bought it last year. Paid the down payment in cash." As I passed my phone around again, the atmosphere in the room had changed completely. The confident family hierarchy had been disrupted, leaving an uncomfortable vacuum. "Why didn't you tell us?" my father finally asked, an edge in his voice that sounded almost like accusation. I took a deep breath, knowing this was the hardest part. Because every achievement I ever shared was either dismissed or compared unfavorably to Brittany's. After a while, it seemed easier to just keep my successes to myself. "That's not true," my mother protested weakly. "We've always supported both our girls." "Have you?" I asked gently. "Dad, at my 28th birthday dinner just last month, you said that at this rate, I'd be half the woman Brittany is forever. You said that not knowing I run a successful company with annual revenue in the high six figures. You said that believing I was struggling financially and professionally, and still, that was how you spoke to me." My father's face flushed red. "I was just trying to motivate you. To push you to reach your potential." "That's not motivation," I said, keeping my voice calm. "That's comparison and criticism. And it's been the soundtrack of my entire life." Brittany, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke. "I had no idea you felt this way, Amber. Or that you were doing all this. How could you?" I replied, without accusation. "Our entire family dynamic has been built around your success and my perceived shortcomings." "I never meant to overshadow you," Brittany said, looking genuinely distressed. "I know," I said, "and I meant it. This isn't about blaming you. You didn't create this dynamic." My father, always quick to recover, tried to shift the narrative. "Well, I always knew you had it in you. The Matthews Drive. I just thought you needed a push to find your direction. I couldn't let this revisionist history stand. Dad, when I told you I was starting a web design business in college, you told me to focus on getting a real job with benefits. When I shared that I'd made money from my digital designs in high school, you compared it unfavorably to Brittany's debate team. You've never believed in my path because it didn't look like what you expected success to be." His face fell, perhaps really hearing me for the first time. My mother had tears in her eyes, her hand covering her mouth. "We never meant to make you feel less than, honey," she said. "We just worried about you taking the unconventional route. We wanted security for you." "I understand that," I said, softening slightly. "But I have security. I have health insurance better than Dad's bank coverage. I have retirement investments. I have a mortgage on a property that's already appreciated 15%. I built all of that myself, without support or recognition, while being told repeatedly that I was making poor choices." Matthew, who had remained silent throughout this exchange, finally spoke up. "I think what Amber has accomplished is extraordinary," he said, looking genuinely impressed. "Building a company from scratch while still in college? That's remarkable by any standard." His sincere acknowledgement, coming from someone who had only ever known me as Brittany's less successful sister, seemed to shift something in the room. It was as if an outside perspective had validated what my family couldn't see on their own. Brittany looked at me with new eyes. "I'm really proud of you, Amber. And I'm sorry if I've contributed to making you feel less than." I've always admired your independence, actually. I just didn't know how to express it. I nodded, accepting her apology without needing to dissect it. This wasn't about making Brittany feel guilty, she was as much a product of our family dynamic as I was. So what happens now? My father asked, looking somewhat lost, perhaps for the first time in his life. Now I go home to my condo, I said with a small smile. And you all adjust to the reality that I'm not who you thought I was. I'm not half of anything. I'm whole and complete on my own terms. I love you all, but I won't accept the old dynamic anymore. I won't hide my success or diminish myself to make anyone else comfortable. I stood, gathering my purse. I think I need some space to process this conversation, and I imagine you all do too. But I wanted you to know the truth, finally. Not out of spite, but because keeping this wall between us wasn't healthy for any of us. As I moved toward the door, my mother rushed after me. Don't go, honey. We should talk more. We will, I assured her. But not tonight. This is a lot for everyone to take in. My father remained seated, still looking at my bank statement with a banker's scrutiny, perhaps trying to find some flaw or error that would restore his understanding of the world. Brittany caught my eye as I was leaving and mouthed a simple "I'm sorry" that seemed more genuine than any interaction we'd had in years. As I walked to my car, I felt lighter than I had in decades. Whatever happened next with my family would be based on truth rather than facade. It wouldn't be perfect, and years of ingrained dynamics wouldn't change overnight. But for the first time, they were seeing the real me, not as half of someone else, but as wholly myself. And that was worth every difficult moment of that conversation. The days following the revelation dinner were quiet. I expected immediate fallout, angry calls accusing me of deception, tearful confrontations, or defensive justifications, but instead encountered something unexpected: thoughtful reflection. 3 days after the dinner, my father called. His usual confident tone had been replaced by something more tentative. Amber, he began, clearing his throat uncomfortably. I've been thinking about what you said. About how we've made you feel all these years. I waited, giving him space to continue without rushing to fill the silence. I never saw it that way, he admitted. I thought I was pushing you to succeed, not undermining you. I'm sorry. The apology was stilted but sincere, perhaps the first genuine apology I'd ever received from my father. Thank you for saying that, I replied. It means a lot. And about your business, he continued, a hint of his banker's curiosity emerging. The revenue model you've built is quite impressive. If you ever want advice on investment strategies or tax structures for high earners. He trailed off, seemingly realizing he was falling into old patterns of assuming I needed his guidance. Actually, I corrected gently, I have a financial advisor I've been working with for 3 years. But I appreciate the offer. Of course, he said quickly. You've clearly got things handled. I'm proud of you, Amber. I should have said that more often. After we hung up, I sat with my emotions for a while. My father's approval, once the currency I desperately sought, now felt like an unexpected bonus rather than a necessary validation. I appreciated it, but I no longer needed it to feel secure in my achievements. The following weekend, my mother showed up at my condo unannounced, carrying a homemade lasagna and wearing an expression of nervous determination. I wanted to see where you live, she explained as I let her in. The real place, not the apartment with the imaginary roommates. As she walked through my spacious downtown condo with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furniture, I watched her perceptions visibly shifting. She ran her hand along my marble kitchen countertop and peeked into my home office with its dual monitors and professional setup. This is beautiful, Amber, she said finally, tears welling in her eyes. You've built all this yourself. I have, I confirmed. I keep thinking about all the times I suggested community college courses or dental hygiene programs, she said, shaking her head. When all along you were building this. You didn't know, I said, finding myself in the unexpected position of comforting her. Because I didn't really look, she admitted. I was so busy worrying about you not following the path I understood that I never considered you might be creating your own. We sat at my dining table, eating lasagna, and talking more honestly than we ever had. My mother shared her fears about my chosen career. The instability she perceived in entrepreneurship, her lack of understanding about the digital economy, her worry that I was isolating myself with work. I think I projected my own insecurities onto you, she confessed. I stayed in teaching because it was safe and predictable. The idea of building something from nothing, like you've done, it would have terrified me. It was scary sometimes, I acknowledged. But also exhilarating. Before she left, she paused at the door. I'm telling all my friends about my entrepreneur daughter now, she said with a small smile. Caroline Miller was bragging about her son the doctor, and I just said, my Amber runs her own digital marketing agency. You should have seen her face. The most surprising response came from Brittany. Late one evening about a week after the dinner, I received a text from her. Can't sleep with this baby kicking. Can we talk? I feel like I need to say some things that are overdue. I called her immediately, curious about what was on her mind. I've been thinking a lot about us, she said without preamble. About how I never noticed what was happening with the way Mom and Dad treated you versus me. You were a kid too, I pointed out. It wasn't your responsibility to notice or fix it. Maybe, she conceded. But as adults? I should have seen it. And I think on some level I did, but it was comfortable being the successful one, you know? It became part of my identity. Her honesty surprised me. I never blamed you for that, I said truthfully. The thing is, she continued, her voice growing quieter, I've been jealous of you for years. Jealous? Of me? The concept was so foreign I almost laughed. You've always known exactly who you are, she explained. You never seem to need anyone's approval to feel valid. Do you know how exhausting it is to be the perfect daughter? The constant pressure to maintain that image? I'd never considered Brittany's experience from that angle. While I'd been fighting for recognition, she'd been trapped by expectations. I followed the path that was laid out for me, she continued. The right school, the right career, the right husband, the right time to have children. Don't get me wrong, I love my life. But sometimes I wonder what I might have chosen if I'd had your courage to forge my own way. Our conversation lasted until 2 a.m, covering territory we'd never explored before, her insecurities, my resentments, our shared experiences of our parents, and the possibility of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than comparison. I want Sophie to know her amazing aunt, Brittany said before we hung up. The real you, not the version I thought I knew. I'd like that, I replied, realizing I meant it. The first family gathering after the revelation was my father's actual promotion celebration dinner at a restaurant. The dynamic had shifted in subtle but significant ways. My parents asked specific questions about my business, showing genuine interest in understanding what I did. My father, in a moment that would have been unthinkable months earlier, actually asked for my advice about the bank's outdated digital marketing strategy. You're the expert in the family, he said, with no trace of irony or condescension. When Brittany shared news about her pregnancy, it wasn't positioned as the only important update of the evening. The conversation flowed more equitably, with each person's life given space and attention. Was it perfect? Far from it. Old habits occasionally surfaced, my mother still sometimes slipped into comparing us, then caught herself with an apologetic glance. My father still had moments of mansplaining business concepts I'd mastered years ago. But there was awareness now, and effort, and that made all the difference. The healing process wasn't linear. There were awkward moments and occasional setbacks. But slowly, a new family dynamic began to emerge, one based on who we actually were rather than who our parents had decided we should be. My business continued to thrive and expand. 6 months after the revelation dinner, I was considering opening a physical office space and hiring 3 more employees. When I mentioned this at a family dinner, my parents responded with genuine enthusiasm rather than concerned warnings about overextension. The greatest lesson I learned through this journey wasn't about proving my worth to others, it was about recognizing it within myself, regardless of external validation. The success I'd built wasn't valuable because it finally made my family see me, it was valuable because it represented my authentic strengths and passions. Being underestimated had, ironically, been a powerful motivator. Without the pressure to conform to my family's narrow definition of success, I'd been free to pursue my own path and define achievement on my own terms. Living authentically hadn't been easy. It had required confrontation and uncomfortable truths. But the peace that came with being fully seen and acknowledged, even if that acknowledgement was still developing, was worth every difficult conversation. As my relationship with my family continues to evolve, I no longer measure my worth against anyone else's yardstick. I am not half or twice or any fraction of another person. I am wholly, completely myself, and finally, my family is beginning to see that too. If you've ever felt overshadowed or underestimated by family members, I'd love to hear your stories in the comments. How did you find your own path to recognition and self-worth? Have you had your own revelation dinner moment, or are you still working toward it? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you, subscribe for more stories of personal growth and family dynamics, and share with anyone who might be struggling to be seen for who they truly are. Remember, sometimes those who see you as half simply aren't seeing the whole picture. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you courage on your own journey to authenticity.